The wheat fields of Blackthorn Hill had always seemed timeless, as though the land itself existed in a quiet pocket of the world where centuries passed without leaving a mark. Under the soft shimmer of the moon, the golden stalks swayed gently in the night breeze, whispering to one another in the language of rustling leaves. The air was still, save for that subtle movement, and the expanse of farmland stretched out under silver light in all directions. Nothing about the evening suggested that anything unusual was about to happen. The moon climbed higher into the ink-blue sky, and the quiet hum of crickets wove its steady rhythm through the countryside. Blackthorn Hill had slept undisturbed for generations. Until that night. By the time dawn rolled in, the first light of day spilling across the horizon, the village was already stirring with an unusual buzz. A group of locals gathered at the edge of the main field, their voices low but sharp, cutting through the cool morning air. Something had happened, something no one could explain. In the heart of the wheat, an enormous formation had appeared overnight. From the field's edge, it was impossible to take it all in at once. It wasn't just a circle, it was a vast, deliberate pattern. Circles nested within circles, spirals that seemed to ripple outward, intersecting with impossibly straight lines and geometric arcs. From the ground, the complexity was overwhelming. From above, one might imagine it looked like a work of cosmic art. The scale was staggering, stretching nearly the length of a football field. Yet the farmer who owned the land insisted the wheat had been untouched when he secured the gates the evening before. There was nothing here, he repeated, shaking his head, his face pale under the brim of his hat. There were no footprints, no tire tracks, no broken stalks beyond the edges of the design. It was as though the patterns had materialized out of thin air. By late morning, word had spread far beyond the village. Narrow country roads clogged with cars as researchers, amateur sleuths, and thrill-seekers arrived in a steady stream. Local news vans parked at odd angles in the ditches, their antennas reaching skyward. People stood on ladders and climbed onto vehicles just to get a better vantage point of the strange design. Theories began almost immediately. Some swore this was the result of a rare meteorological phenomenon, unseen atmospheric forces twisting the crops in precise, unnatural shapes. Others whispered about extraterrestrial visitors, citing similar formations reported in England, Australia, and Japan. The most skeptical insisted it was a well-planned hoax, but even they struggled to explain the absence of human traces. Amid the chaos, one figure remained apart from the noise. Dr. Elara Finch had arrived quietly, without the bluster of television crews or the excitable chatter of conspiracy enthusiasts. She was a careful, methodical investigator, known for approaching unexplained phenomena with both scientific rigor and an open mind. For hours, she walked the perimeter of the design, noting details, measuring distances, and collecting samples. It was Elara who first noticed something deeply unusual about the stalks themselves. She knelt in the center of one curve and examined the wheat with delicate precision. The plants weren't snapped or crushed, they had been bent as though softened, each stalk curling at perfect angles without breaking. It was as if the fibers had been altered on a microscopic level. The finding puzzled her. No conventional tool or prank could produce such uniformity without damage. This was something different, something she couldn't yet name. By nightfall, the crowd had begun to thin. Most of the journalists packed up, chasing the next story. The curious onlookers trickled home, leaving behind an eerie stillness that settled over the field. That was when Elara decided to return. The moon now hung high in a sky scattered with cold stars, casting silver light over the strange geometry below. Alone in the field, she stepped carefully into the largest of the circles. Her boots made a soft crunch on the soil. She set down her recorder and closed her eyes, letting the quiet surround her. Then she heard it. A faint hum. It was low, resonant, and steady, like a sound she could feel more than hear, its rhythm almost matching her own heartbeat. She opened her eyes, scanning the sky and the surrounding wheat. The air above the largest circle was different. It shimmered faintly, distorting the stars as if heat were rising from the ground. The effect intensified until, in a sudden burst, a blinding white flash lit the field. When the light faded, the hum had vanished. The shimmer was gone, and so was her recorder. The following morning brought fresh astonishment. The formation in the wheat had changed. Beside the original design, a second pattern had appeared. This one was harsher, sharp lines and angular shapes replacing the flowing curves from before. Where the first had seemed almost decorative, this felt purposeful, deliberate, and unsettling. Elara spent the rest of the day in her rented study space, poring over drone photographs she'd taken at sunrise. Under a magnifying lamp, she traced the lines of the new pattern. It wasn't just random geometry, it reminded her of something. Not letters exactly, but symbols, pieces of a language she couldn't fully translate. By midday, rumors swirled like a storm. Some said the second formation was a map pointing to something buried deep underground. Others insisted it was a countdown to an unknown event. The more superstitious claimed it was a warning from beyond the earth. That evening, mist rolled in from the moors as Elara drove back to Blackthorn Hill. Her headlights cut through the fog, illuminating pale streaks of wheat swaying in the wind. The once crowded field now lay abandoned. The tourists had fled after news broke that a local boy had gone missing while camping near the site. Elara parked at the field's edge and walked toward the first circle. As she stepped into its boundaries, the temperature seemed to drop several degrees. The air felt unnaturally heavy, like she had crossed into a different atmosphere entirely. She pulled a handheld EMF meter from her bag. The moment it powered on, the needle jerked violently to the right. The hum returned. This time it was louder, more insistent. Her chest tightened as a vibration pulsed up through the ground beneath her feet. The wheat began to sway again, but not in any natural rhythm. It moved as though responding to an unseen current flowing upward from the soil. The two crop formations lit faintly, their shapes outlined in a subtle glow, as if traced by invisible fire. Elara stumbled backward, her gaze darting between the patterns. Then realization struck. The two formations were not separate. The second had been designed to align perfectly with the first. Together, they formed a single massive symbol, so large it could only be fully understood from above. At the symbol's exact center, the air began to twist violently. A narrow vertical slit appeared, cutting through the space as if the very fabric of reality had been sliced open. Through the gap, Elara glimpsed stars, yet not the familiar constellations above Blackthorn Hill. These were colder, sharper, and arranged in patterns she had never seen before. The hum deepened, shifting into something that resembled a voice. The words were not in any language she recognized, yet somehow she understood them clearly. 3 nights remain. Her breath caught. Before she could respond, the slit snapped shut, the glow faded, the hum fell silent. Elara stood frozen in the darkness, the wind tugging at her coat. Then, from her pocket, a sudden vibration startled her. She pulled out her phone. The screen was entirely black, save for a single glowing symbol, the same one that marked the center of the field. Beneath it, a number blinked slowly. Elara sat in her car for nearly 20 minutes, the black screen of her phone still pulsing with that strange symbol and the blinking too. She couldn't bring herself to turn the ignition. The air inside the vehicle felt stifling, as though the strange energy from the field had followed her inside. Her mind raced. 3 nights remain. The words echoed over and over, threading themselves between the thump of her pulse. Remaining until what? She had encountered plenty of unexplained events in her career, but never had she been given a deadline, never a direct message like this. When she finally drove away, the mist on the road seemed thicker, the headlights casting an almost liquid beam ahead of her. Every shadow on the hedgerows looked unnatural, every flicker of light in the distance suspicious. By the time she reached her rented cottage, her hands were trembling. Sleep was out of the question. Instead, she sat at the small kitchen table with her laptop, cross-referencing every documented case of crop circle alterations. She combed through archived drone footage, eyewitness interviews, and obscure blogs maintained by fringe researchers. There were similarities, but nothing matched exactly. In a few rare cases, patterns had shifted or expanded overnight, but never had 2 formations merged into one unified symbol. And certainly none had been accompanied by the kind of voice she had heard, or the strange astronomical view through the slit in the air. By dawn, she had only one certainty: she couldn't walk away from this. The next day, she returned to the field. This time, she brought more equipment: thermal imaging cameras, ground-penetrating radar, and an array of environmental sensors. The farmer, who had grown uneasy with the media attention, granted her permission only on the condition she keep her distance from the newscasters now swarming at the village pub. The wheat rustled softly as she walked toward the formation. The EMF meter spiked again, though not as violently as the night before. She planted the thermal camera on a tripod, letting it scan the center of the pattern. The results were baffling. The ground within the circle was warmer than the surrounding field by several degrees, not enough to burn the crops, but certainly enough to suggest some kind of sustained energy source. There was no visible machinery, no buried cables, nothing that could explain it. At midday, she decided to run the ground-penetrating radar. It revealed a faint, irregular shape buried deep below the surface, too deep to be farming debris and far too large to be a simple rock formation. Whatever it was, it lay directly beneath the merged symbol's center. Her thoughts spiraled with possibilities: an ancient structure, a meteorite, or perhaps something not from this earth at all. That evening, she drove into the village to get supplies. The air felt charged, the way it does before a thunderstorm, and people on the street spoke in hushed tones. An old man outside the general store stopped her, gripping her wrist. "You're out there at night, aren't you?" he said, his voice brittle but urgent. Elara hesitated. "I'm investigating." "Then you'd better listen," he rasped. "This isn't the first time." She leaned closer. "Go on." His eyes darted nervously toward the sky. 30 years ago, in another part of the moors, a formation like that appeared, changed every night for 3 days. On the 4th, there was something in the sky. People vanished. Some came back. Most didn't. Ilara's heart thudded. What happened to the ones who came back? The old man's gaze grew distant. They were never the same. Eyes like they'd seen something that doesn't belong in this world. Before she could ask more, he released her and shuffled away, disappearing into the store. That night, she returned to the field just before midnight. The mist was thicker than ever, wrapping the wheat in ghostly veils. She carried a thermal camera in one hand and her phone in the other. The blinking 2 on the screen had changed to a 1. The hum began almost immediately, rising from the ground like the memory of a sound. Her skin prickled, and she could feel the vibration in her bones. The merged symbol glowed again, But this time, the lines were brighter, sharper, almost blinding. The vertical slit appeared in the air once more, wider than before. Through it, she saw the alien sky again, this time with a vast, dark shape moving slowly against the backdrop of unfamiliar constellations. The hum deepened, and once again the voice came. 2 nights remain. Her hands tightened around the camera. "What happens in 2 nights?" she demanded aloud. The voice did not answer. Instead, the slit pulsed once, like a heartbeat, and then the glow vanished. When she lowered the camera, she noticed something new. Small, glowing orbs, no larger than a fist, hovered low over the wheat, drifting slowly along the lines of the pattern. They moved with a strange intelligence, almost as if mapping or scanning the formation. One of the orbs drifted toward her. It stopped just a meter away, spinning gently. She raised her hand without thinking, and in an instant, the orb shot upward, vanishing into the night sky. The others followed, streaking away in silence. When she checked her phone, the symbol remained, but the number now read 0. Her stomach turned cold. The countdown wasn't to begin. It had already ended. The realization hit Elara like a physical blow. The countdown wasn't counting towards some distant event. It had already reached its end. Whatever was coming had begun. The field felt different now, heavier. The night air seemed to cling to her skin, and every sound, the rustle of wheat, the faint hiss of the wind, felt muffled, as though the world had been wrapped in thick fabric. She forced herself to keep moving, scanning the formation with her thermal camera. The glow from the merged symbol had faded, but the ground temperature was climbing steadily, as though something beneath the soil was waking up. A low rumble rolled through the field. It was deeper than thunder, almost felt more than heard. The wheat stalks quivered, and the merged crop circle began to pulse with light again, slowly at first, then faster, until the lines seemed to ripple like molten gold. Elara stepped back instinctively, her boots crunching over the flattened stalks. The air split open. Not just a narrow slit this time, an enormous rift tore itself across the sky above the formation, stretching wider than the entire field. Through it, she saw not one alien world, but a cascade of impossible vistas, a black ocean under 2 suns, a jagged, glass-like desert shimmering with green fire, a city of towering spires suspended in clouds of violet gas. Her breath caught as she realized something else. The rift wasn't just showing her these places, it was reaching. The ground beneath her feet cracked, just enough for a thin beam of light to seep upward. A column of the same golden glow shot into the rift, as though the formation were feeding it energy. Then she heard it. The voice. It was no longer calm. It resonated like 1,000 overlapping tones, impossible to pin to one speaker. "The way is open." In that moment, the missing boy appeared. He stood at the edge of the circle, his face pale in the light, his eyes locked on hers, wide and glassy, like someone who had been staring into a blinding sun for hours. His clothes were rumpled but clean, and in his hands he held a stalk of wheat, its fibers glowing faintly. "Elara," he said softly. His voice didn't sound like a child's anymore. There was something layered beneath it, something old. She stepped toward him. "Where have you been?" "In between," he replied. "They showed me everything, but now they want more." Before she could respond, the rift flared with brilliant light. Shapes began to emerge, tall, slender forms made of shifting, translucent matter, their edges constantly reconfiguring like liquid geometry. They moved with an eerie grace, stepping from one reality into hers as easily as crossing a threshold. The boy turned his gaze back to the rift. They said, the circle is a door, and once it's open, it can't be closed. The hum returned, louder than ever, shaking the ground. Elara's EMF meter screamed in her bag, the needle maxed out. She could barely hold the camera steady as the figures approached the center of the circle. Her mind raced. If the formation was a door, maybe it could be reversed, closed, if the pattern was broken. She looked at the glowing lines, at the perfect symmetry that had held since the first morning. It was a risk. If she disrupted it, she had no idea what might happen. But if she didn't, she feared that everything would change.